Presenting Benny Goodman and his music.
Good evening, everybody. Evening, Chris and Gene. This may in fact be a bad idea tonight, but we'll see. Oh, hey, Miles. Contractually obligated Miles' appearance. He has fulfilled his contract already. Evening, Martin. Hey, Dina, Timothy, and Kathleen. I'm pre-gaming a little bit here. I drank a bit during the speech just now. Hey, Maria. Hey, Swanson. Amy. Hello, everybody. Hey, Kathy.
Ladies and gentlemen, the man with the torrid clarinet and the even more torrid band who pervades...
Hey, Barbara Ractavia. Hey, Gene. Yeah, just got this shirt. It came in the mail today.
And first of all, one of Irving Berlin's greatest hits, Blue Sky.
Hey, Miles. Yeah, Miles. Kathy Biden just made a soul of the nation kind of speech. Of the hecklers, he noted that good manners is something they've never suffered from. Hey, Joanne. Hey, June. And finishing off the smoked pineapple whiskey. Smoked pineapple rum. Which has been delicious. The fact that this has lasted me several months shows about how little I actually drink. It's not that much. Hey, Lori over on YouTube. Hey, Kathy and John and Miguel and Paula and Cindy. Hey, Susan. Hey, Dad. Hey, Susan. Hey, Larry and Karen and Linda. Yeah, see. Now the texture on this shirt, I don't know what kind of material it is. Like, feels like very thin polyester. I don't know, but it kind of feels like a Halloween costume more than a Halloween shirt. But it looks cool. Thank you, John. We're all sharing a drink we call loneliness, but it's better than drinking alone. Jacqueline! Welcome back, Jacqueline. Oh yeah, I noticed I had a bunch of bottles that had just a little bit of booze left in them, and they're taking up space. I don't like things that are taking up space. Of course, nobody needs to be drinking except for me tonight. And I could be faking it for all you guys know. It's not like it's hard to fake drunk. But thank you, Phoenix. Everybody seems to like this shirt. I wore it out just to go support. They were having kind of a rally at the unionized Starbucks. Everybody who saw it said something nice about it. Chris, one mega drink? Well, there's a new Megadeth album out at 11 o'clock. Well, John, I got this shirt by clicking an ad on Facebook. Facebook ads really know how to find exactly my kind of shirts. If you see me wearing some kind of mid-century modern shirt, it's probably because I clicked a targeted ad. Those ads know how to target me. Hey, well, congrats on the anniversary to Georgino. Thanks, everybody. A lot of people are digging this shirt. I'm digging this shirt. It's one of those instant purchase when I saw the ad. I'm an easy target for targeted ads. And Maureen. Yeah, Hard Daddy, that's the one. Hard Daddy. Like Hard Daddy, but with only the one D, which makes it somehow more acceptable.
Benny Goodman presents Helen Moore singing With All My Heart.
Evening, Tracy. Well, the workers were on strike like yesterday or the day before yesterday. I drove by and honked for them a couple of times. Today they were doing like this soft thing where they encourage people to come and order low maintenance drinks. And bring cash tips. So I did. I mean, I always get a black coffee anyway. When I'm president, there will be a separate line for people who just want black coffee. Yeah, well, yeah, Hard Daddy with just the one D. Don't Google that. Miles. Miles is hanging out. Let me show you a picture. I haven't posted this yet. But Miles loves candles. He'll just stare and stare at a candle. Hey, Ellen, welcome back. Miles is hanging out. Telling of the miracle we say. Sweet mango with frozen strawberries. That sounds good. Say again. Hello, hello, Lauren. I used to stare at candles and like try to use the force to make them go out. It only worked once. Hey, Teresa. Hey, Susan. Hey, Kelly. Mojito sounds good. Miles is just flopping down on the desk. Maybe that motion like, come do this thing to me. Hey, Debbie. Hey, Bala. Kathy, that is an absolutely a valid choice to eat ice cream rather than drinking. I fully support that. It only worked once. I totally stole from the Adventures of Pete and Pete. Friend of mine, Julie Halpern, just published a zine about her time working as an intern on the Adventures of Pete and Pete. Hey, Mom, I'm fine. I'm 42 years old, you know. I am perfectly capable of getting a little bit tipsy occasionally. Cat is from harddaddy.com. Amy, no, this is the same decorations I always have. Ronnie just told me I could go down to the basement storage area and bring up the Halloween and fall decorations, like all of the leaves and stuff. And it's already out at Dollar Tree. I got a couple minutes yet to go. I am double old enough to drink. Hey, Johan. You know what really goes through you is embalming fluid. That's incredible, Dory. Congratulations. Kathleen, there's some, they're not colored ice cubes. They're little plastic, reusable ice cubes in the shape of Mickey Mouse. Marcia, yeah, I turned 42 in July. Law enforcement among the brewers? Nah. Well, no, there's me. I have the power to ban people, and I'm willing to use it if we get someone from who has never suffered from good manners. You know. Basically, I don't tolerate a lot of MAGA shit on my web pages. This is not a safe space for your bullshit, MAGA folks. When they go low, you kick them in the face while it's nice and close to your foot. Hey, Grandma Bell. Hey, Amy. Yeah, 1980. Ooh. Just the edge where nobody knows whether to call us geriatric millennials or Gen X. I just saw on MSNBC that we're Gen X. We'll let Benny Goodman do this one more song here. Karen, I know, I'm still young compared to my average viewer. I just went out with some Chicago Architecture Foundation people the other day for lunch at the club. And I feel as though the combined age of the four of us was probably 300. And I only contribute so much of that, you know. But in the historical field, I'm still very young. Kristen, I'm 42, I'm not geriatric anything. Millennials mean you came of age after the millennium. That's the whole point. And it was pretty fancy. It was the Cliff Dwellers, which is a club for, like, architects and artists and journalists and stuff. One of the Graceland trustees, and I thought he was gonna like rip me on something, but no, he was very thrilled that I talked about Thomas Barber Bryan, like I don't talk about him all the time. Now, behaving is kind of optional around here. Oregon Trail generation I like. I also like the DuckTales generation. Not everybody likes the shirt. I haven't gotten this many compliments on a shirt in a long time. Lori, that is true. But then I will just point you over to Amy Gridley. Who was 50 when she had a baby in 1826. Katie, really, I'm too young for Star Wars. I was super into Star Wars, but I was on the younger end of that for sure. But I do remember seeing Jedi in the theaters. I remember exactly which stuffed animal I brought with me. Because the stuffed animal was scared of the Rancor, not me. I remember very specifically, I remember dropping off Eli at Grandma Bell's house. Where's the spider, Kathy? The spider's right here. We have let Benny Goodman go on a little too long here. But alright, that means it is time that we go ahead and get started properly. I was supposed to have this thing up like this the whole time. I knew I was forgetting something, but I guess, this is Scritch Scratch by Lindsay Curry, who joined us on a mini tour just the other day. Doing a drinking tour using a children's book to promote it seemed a little bit off. So, welcome along, everybody. I'm Adam Seltzer for Mysterious Chicago Tours. Tonight is the Drunk History Edition. I often have a cocktail while I'm drinking, but usually I'm nursing like a shot through the course of the entire tour. In any case, I'm Adam from Mysterious Chicago. I've been a tour guide and historian here for going on 20 years now. I've got about a dozen Chicago history books out, including Mysterious Chicago, the book, H.H. Holmes, The True History of the White City Devil, for which they are late on paying me my biannual royalties. Chicago, Ghosts of Chicago, now a rare collector's item. I realize I now have all of the rights back to this, so I could put it up as an ebook at least myself. I could get it published again, if anybody wanted to do that. We shall see. It would have to be updated or something. That's work. I got other work that I want to do more like the Johann Hawk book. The Just Kill Me. This is a young adult novel about a ghost tour guide who makes places more haunted by killing people at them. Giant hit. Would have been a much more successful Netflix series than it was as a book. I don't know why I have the I Put a Spell on You book up here in this deck. Or I Kissed a Zombie and I Liked It. Murder Maps. That's another new one. Murder Maps from a company that I think might just be persuaded to publish my time travel pub crawl book. And of course, the brand new Graceland Cemetery, Chicago Stories, Symbols, and Secrets, which I will be discussing on WLS Radio tomorrow morning on the Steve Cochran Show at about 7:30 a.m., which should not interfere with Find a Grave Friday. The cats just went on a running chase. They like playing a game that I think is called Horse Stampede. I have been involved in this kind of a field for so long that I have even been written into conspiracy theories. Like, look at this. Seltzer was planted to get you closer to the truth. Look at his biography. He started out writing a book called I Kissed a Zombie and I Liked It. It's hard to take this guy seriously, and that's part of the ruse. I was planted by the government to get you closer to the truth about H.H. Holmes. So says this guy. I got a lot of stuff in this deck. What have I got here? There's Bathhouse John for no reason. And a whole lot of pictures of me in the Alley of Death and Mutilation. Going back, this is how long I've been doing ghost tours in Chicago. Here's me. This is probably 2008. This is possibly as far back as 2006 right over here. A lot of pictures of me looking like a dork over here in the alley. Yeah, May of 2006. This is probably one of the earliest pictures of me doing a ghost tour. But I've been doing ghost tours in Chicago. That was how I got started in the tour business for going on 20 years now. And now I've got about a dozen Chicago history books and am incredibly famous. I don't really do quite as much ghost stuff anymore, but for a while I was doing 300 ghost tours every year. So some of this stuff, I've joked that I could probably do it in my sleep. And in fact, there were nights when I did a 10 o'clock to 1 a.m. tour where I probably was doing it in my sleep. There were a couple of times when I noticed that I was at Hull House and I started talking. If you look at that window right up there, and then I realized I was slipping into telling the story of the Alley of Death and Mutilation. And it would be a while. You kind of lose your place because, you know, I'm giving the speech, but I'm thinking about hamburgers the whole time or something like that. So tonight, as a challenge to myself and to amuse all of you with my antics, we are doing Ghosts of Chicago, the Drunk History Edition. I started pre-gaming right before the show started. Finish it off the bottle of smoked pineapple rum that I purchased earlier this summer and has now been taking up space on my counter, though it was delicious. And we're going to see if I can really do this as well as I think based on muscle memory. It's not without precedent. Now, back when I was working on boat tours where I would talk for 90 minutes straight per tour and then do 4 or 5 tours back to back to back, by the end of it I needed something for my throat and also something to keep myself amused. So the last tour of the night was often my martini tour, where I would switch to the other water bottle, which was usually something to do with gin and tonic, or perhaps gin and vermouth. And I would do the last tour fairly drunk. It was fun. It was hard, actually, because I realized I wasn't really... I realized I was kind of bouncing around in my sentences. Muscle memory would kind of juggle things around, but I don't think anybody ever noticed. I was able to cover it up reasonably well, but it was made my throat feel a little bit better, made me feel like I was having a little bit more fun, which on a day when you're doing 4 of the same tour over and over and over again, it kind of happens. So we are moving on to some cheap gin now, just the kind of thing Charles Dickens used to rail against in such books as Sketches by Boz. But all right, we're going to get started. We're going to talk some ghost stories. We're going to see if I can still do these things while I'm fairly drunk. We'll start out right here by the Rainforest Cafe. Nothing too scary about the Rainforest Cafe, except now and then they've got this dude in a frog suit out there who scares the bejesus out of me. People laugh when I say that, but I have to go through life without a bejesus now. You all just got privilege checked right there. That's what happened to you. But this neighborhood used to be quite a bit more frightening than it is today. This wall on the left used to be nothing but brothels in the 1890s. 1898, right about here, Telly Wolfe, a woman who ran one of the places, was stabbed through the face with a sharpened umbrella stick that went through her skull and into her brain. Thus perished Tilly Wolfe. That's how she got over the unfortunate habit of being alive. Right across the street, about the very same week, a woman was murdered by her jealous ex-boyfriend right where Fado the fake Irish pub is now. It would have been on the 2nd floor of a place, and this made so little news at the time that it was only like a month later in an article about how rough the neighborhood was that it was even mentioned at all. And by then, Tilly Wolfe was out of the news. Now, right where the Maggiano's is now, this used to be the St. Regis Hotel, not to be confused with the current St. Regis Hotel. Mob used to shove showgirls out the window of that place. Ray Wilson, in particular, got shoved out. Officially, the story was that she jumped, but if you're going to jump out of a building, you'd probably pick a taller one than that. They would used to be a guy working the valet spot right there, and I would shout, and they died right where that guy is standing. We knew each other pretty well. And over here at the hotel, this is the site of a place called the C&O Tavern, or C&O Restaurant, where a gangster named Hoopsa-Daisy Connors was shot through the eye and the groin one grim day in early 1929. A couple of things I've never figured out. I've looked up a lot about Hoopsa-Daisy, but I haven't figured out why they called him that yet. I should really look that up. More things have been digitized now. Also, I've never figured out if it was one bullet or two. Because I can kind of imagine, you know, the magic bullet that went through both the eye and the groin. But I really figured, like, if you shoot somebody in the eye or the groin, you can stop. I mean, you've won the fight at this point. It's like those action movies where a guy rips somebody's arm off and then starts beating him with it. It's like, dude, you ripped his arm off. You won. You don't have to keep fighting. It's all over now. All right, but coming up over across the street as we pull down over onto Illinois Street is this fire station, frequently a target of developers. A lot of people want to tear this down and put some kind of high-rise here. Perhaps not realizing or not caring just how much of a fuss I would make about the fact that they're building housing right in a place where they used to hang people. So this is a fire station situated on the site of the old jail that was up here till the 1920s when they moved everybody over to the one on 26th in California. Right around where truck number 3, that garage is now, is where they used to hang people. From 1873 to 1927, just about 100 men were hanged by the neck until they were dead in this spot. Now, a really good hangman can get people in the cell to dead at the end of the rope in 30 seconds or less. In Chicago, it usually took about 15 minutes. Now, I get asked in a lot of interviews, is it true that it took 15 minutes for H.H. Holmes to die when he was hanged in Philadelphia? And I'll say, yeah, that was widely reported, but also if you read a lot of 19th century hanging accounts, they say that pretty much every time. It's not really all that unusual. But this place is said to be haunted. I've at least heard secondhand that there are firefighters who don't like spending a night in this place. And of course, if you see them out there on lawn chairs and ass, they'll just be like, oh yeah, we don't care about nothing, man. I ain't afraid of no ghost. But I have heard it secondhand. They can hear a guy singing in there. Based on what he's singing, it would presumably be the ghost of a guy by the name of Carl Wanderer, one of the finest names ever for a ghost. Carl Wanderer. So Carl Wanderer was a guy who lived in the 1910s here in Chicago, and one day he came up to a drifter on Madison Street, back when that was Skid Row, as we discussed just the other day in the Sunday morning tour. He came up to this drifter and said, hey buddy, you gotta help me out. See, I'm in the doghouse with my wife. She's about to have a baby, doesn't think I'm good enough to be a dad, so here's what I'm thinking. If you'll come pretend to mug us tomorrow so I can punch you in the face and look like a hero, I'll give you $10. Drifter agreed to the deal. Wanderer loaned him a pistol to make it all look more authentic. Next day, he and his wife were walking home from the movies. This was their house, still standing today, and conveniently decorated with Halloween decorations the day I went out there to film this for the tours. So they walked up to this place, and the drifter was hanging out in this vestibule, waiting with the pistol, just like they'd practiced. So he jumped out and said, all right, man, give me all your bucks. Wanderer pulled out another pistol of his own and shot the drifter to death. Then he turned to the side and shot his wife to death, too. This had been his plan the entire time. He didn't want to be a dad. He wanted to get back into the army or something. There's not really a coherent explanation. There's several different ones in circulation. But in any case, he had decided to kill his wife and blame the whole thing on the drifter, who by then would be too dead to argue with him. And for a couple of days, the newspapers thought he was the real hero. But then there was Detective Sergeant John W. Norton, who had gotten a lot better at police work since his time investigating the H.H. Holmes murder castle 25 years before. He was kind of like a Columbo on the police force. The way that they describe it, it's always like he talked like he was just like he was trying to be their friends, just trying to clear everything up. Then he'd throw out but just one more thing. With Carl, it was like, no, there's just one more thing I don't understand. You and the drifter had the same model of pistol, and they were just one serial number apart. How the heck does that happen? At that point, Wanderer got all flustered and said, oh, they were both my guns, but I was carrying both of them. I pulled them both out. The drifter took one away from me. And so there's now another thing I don't understand. How come you took 2 guns to the movies with you? How many people did you think you were going to have to shoot? Which nowadays he'd probably just say, well, that's all that I could carry, or what's one of those other dorky things people say for stuff like that. But in any case, he finally broke down and confessed. He took the confession back a couple of times. Trial went on for a really long time, but eventually he was sentenced to be hanged. And when they brought you out to be hanged in those days, they expected you to put on a good show. You were supposed to make a speech about how sorry you were. Maybe something about how nice the warden had been, but Wanderer wouldn't do any of that stuff. When they brought this guy out to be hanged, he said, instead of making a speech, he made them all sit there and listen while he sang one of those depressing, droning parlor songs from the 20s. It went like, if you hear my prayer, away a old pal, why don't you answer? That kind of shit. I'm not drunk enough to sing the entire thing in any case. I've been doing enough with parlor songs with that Paul Dresser story lately anyway. But those were his last words, and that is the ghost. People have said that on cold Friday mornings especially. Friday was Hangman's Day. They say that you can still hear the sound of Carl Wanderer out there singing that song. There were also a lot of reports about the death cell, the place where people would spend their last night being haunted. There's article after article about that, including, in particular, they like to say that Johann Hawk was haunting the place. The story went that at the time that he was hanged, he shouted, "My curse is upon you," right before he was hanged. This was not noted in any of the contemporary accounts of his hangings, but Johann Hawk, we talk about quite a lot around here. Here's him spending his last night in the death cell, which I think he did a couple of times. He kept getting his sentence commuted at the last second. But the Chicago Evening American even put together this photograph of his march to the gallows, which is probably not 100% accurate. It definitely looks retouched, what we would now call photoshopped. And they always did that in those days just to make the photos look presentable. And here we've got the Chicago American's edition breaking out the big font. But at the same time, there was also a story, this was also where they hanged the Haymarket guys. Including there was a guy by the name of Louis Ling who was scheduled to be hanged for his involvement in the Haymarket affair, which he may not have had anything to do with at all. But he was arrested for it. He was sentenced to be hanged, but the night before the execution, he bit into a dynamite cap and blew his own head off. The next day, the newspaper reporters said that they were hearing the sound of him singing and screaming, walking around in the gallows area. It was probably just the jailhouse cat. Probably. But we're going to move on from here a little bit. Thank you for the note on Carl Wanderer's actual gun model. Over in the comments, I have switched to straight gin. On the right was a 55 whacker by my next door neighbor Otto Stark, who I never actually see. I've seen him like twice in the 3 years I've been his next door neighbor. He doesn't come outside much. He's mostly up at like 2 o'clock in the morning. Goodman Theater on the right-hand side currently does contain a skull, or it did a while ago. The skull attributed to Del Close, though they're pretty sure it's not really his. They're pretty open about it. But back behind it is this mural-filled alley that was once the site, that the Chicago Tribune once referred to as the Alley of Death and Mutilation. One of the classiest moments in Chicago Tribune history right there. Now this is the alley back behind what would have been the Iroquois Theater. What's this picture? The place was built in 1903. They broke ground in July and opened it in November of that same year after only about 3 months worth of construction. Now, normally, and if you want to get a pothole filled around here, it takes at least a year and a half. So to get a theater built that quickly, they had to cut an awful lot of corners, leaving out things like the sprinkler system. But then when they opened it, they advertised it in all the papers as absolutely fireproof. Sound ominous to anyone? On the bus, I would often note that this bus is absolutely crash-proof. Now, this first show running here, Mr. Bluebeard, was a musical comedy revue featuring a famous vaudeville comic of the day by the name of Eddie Foy. Move this over here. Here he is playing Sister Anne in this absolutely atrocious panto. Even at the time, they said it could never quite get over its typical British stupidity. That's what they said in the Tribune review. Featuring such immortal songs as Come Buy Our Luscious Fruits, Oriental Slaves Are We Come From Dalmatia, and the Algerian Slave Song. Does this sound like a party yet or what? So, there's also, I do have one recording of one of the songs. This is,
Milwaukee famous made our
the beer
New
that
York
made Milwaukee famous.
for the big Dutch band, the finest in the land. Played till 5 o'clock. Yara Marianne Breen, she kicked the tambourine, she woke the entire block. Marty McGee threw away the key that belonged to Murphy's trunk. And the beer that made Milwaukee famous made our New York drunk.
This was a children's Christmas show. Actually, it was about a guy who kills his wives and hangs them up on meat hooks in his closet. Bluebeard. They often refer to Johann Hawk as a Bluebeard, in fact. But for the first act, everything went off without a hitch. The songs had only a little bit to do with the plot, as was typical of musical theater at the time. About midway through Act 2, there was an octet going on doing the Floridora dance. This was similar to Florodora. I don't think it was even as good a song as that one. The classic Florodora song was a group like this singing, "Tell me, pretty maiden, are there many more at home like you?" This was a song called "Let Us Swear" by the Pale Moonlight, and while they were singing and dancing, Eddie Foy noticed that the orchestra had stopped. Came back on stage and found that one of the calcium lights, marked by the X over here on this picture, had arced and sent a couple of sparks into the drapes on the wall, causing them to catch fire. So, Eddie Foy was not stupid. He got all the people off stage, said, "All right, folks, there's nothing at all serious, but you know how the insurance companies are. We'll have to evacuate just for the moment, but as soon as we get this taken care of, we'll bring everybody back inside. So don't get excited. Leave the theater slowly." Then he ordered somebody to hurry up, open up the backstage door, and get that guy with the kill fire. Kill fire was this fire prevention thing they had. It was mostly made out of asbestos. It didn't work at all. Also, the fire curtain was supposed to be this massive fire curtain that they could lower down in between the stage and the audience to keep fires from spreading. Every theater was required by law to have one. But asbestos was rather expensive, so they were using a blend of asbestos, cotton, and wood pulp, which saved them $56 and also gave them a curtain that wouldn't have to be replaced as often, but also gave them a completely useless fireproof curtain. So when the orchestra opened up the backstage door, that created a backdraft which caught all the flames on stage and turned them into what people described as a balloon of fire that shot out into the auditorium. So everybody panicked, rushed towards the doors, and the doors were locked. They could theoretically be unlocked, but it was a new kind of a fancy French locking mechanism that nobody could figure out in the middle of a panic. Some people rushed towards the exits, but the exits were not only locked, but open in towards the lobby instead of out towards the doors. So instead of crashing through the doors, people crashed into the doors. This had already been grossly illegal for about 20 years to have doors that open in towards the lobby like that, but nobody was really paying attention to these things. It was really the crush to get out more than the fire that actually killed people. Things were no better up on the balcony. This is the gate that they were using to lock the people in the cheap seats in so that they couldn't sneak into the better seats. That naturally made it rather hard to escape. And once again, this alley back over here, you can see some fire escapes up overhead here. People ask me sometime, what's the scariest place I've ever been? It's that top fire escape up at the top of this one. Partly because it still feels rather rickety to me. And also, it's almost like you can just feel all the energy of the people who were shoved over the rails of that thing. You tend to hear that there were no fire escapes at all, that people were just saying, out you go, out you go, out you go, not realizing that they were dropping to their death. It wasn't quite that dramatic. It was just most of the fire escapes weren't really built to hold more than a couple of people. So people ended up in a pile of bodies down here in what was called the Alley of Death and Mutilation. So you can see over here, people are just can't get down the stairs, so they're doing whatever they can, jumping off, getting shoved off over the rails. They were only built to hold a couple of people at a time. Now, it's difficult nowadays to know how many people died in something like this. The agreed-upon figure is somewhere in the range of 600. 602 tends to be the official number, but it can vary a little bit. Now, stories about ghosts started to circulate almost immediately. Like, this is a picture taken a couple of days after the fire from the stage. It was like a big panorama of the rubble. You can get like a massive, massive TIFF file of this on the Library of Congress. Last time I was there, they had it really, really misspelled, so it's kind of hard to find, but it's there. But this is this massive picture. You can see the whole burned out theater. And you can see the theater actually was more or less fireproof. The theater itself was reopened a few months later. It's just the things inside of it that weren't fireproof, like people wearing winter clothes. But check out the balcony up there. Up on the balcony, we'll have to zoom in here a bit. But up on the balcony, you can see this guy standing there, and then all these people around him who are just kind of half there. Now, this is probably explained by there being a long exposure, but a couple of these people, it's very surprising to me that they would have been up there. These are not all people in uniform. Some of these are just people hanging around. The odds that they would let a woman in there seems really unusual to me. But even if this is a camera trick, you can understand how this inspired stories of ghosts haunting the place, which people started talking about, again, just about immediately. Now, really, there's as many things in the alley as anything else. These kids, just realized these kids in the picture here, you can see where it says fire exit, Arnold Palmer sells drugs here. These kids are probably 22 or 23 years old now. That's a little sobering to think about. But out here in the alley, where there are many, many pictures of me looking like an absolute fool walking down the street, here's a long exposure example right here. Perhaps the most famous ghost is one called Nellie Reed. She was a trapeze artist in the show, one of only a couple of performers who died. She is said to show up as a silhouette along some of the garages in the alley. And I thought I saw her a couple of times back before the alleys had been painted over with murals. A couple times. There was also this picture taken by the husband of a woman who was on the tour with her friend. The guy was not into the tour, but he took the picture, and then met behind them was this form that kind of looks like Nellie to me. And this was something that showed up on his digital camera. It wasn't a smartphone, it was a camera, and he showed it to me immediately and had emailed it to me by the next morning, and he was not impressed by it at all himself. So unless he had really gone in the night before and rigged this up, this was, not on a thing where we would have had an app to do things like this. It's a very spooky shot to me. There's also this picture. The guy who took this picture absolutely swears that there was nobody standing there in the space where the guy is standing there without a face. Every time I mention that, I get a lot of jokes about Slender Man, or I used to. That being by the way. And once again, several pictures of me. Now, I'm not really sure what I'm doing here. I'm probably talking about the fact, the very first night I was doing ghost tours out here in the alley, I was telling all these stories, and a woman got a picture of me, which is scary enough some nights. I know, that one's a freebie. But in front of me that night, there was like a floating pant leg and shoe just hovering in front of my face. And that kind of freaks me out. If that had been a ghost falling in front of me, and their leg was right here, that would have meant that their ass was right in my face. Not the kind of thing we stop to think about on ghost tours much, but maybe we should. There's also possibly Harriet Wolfe is said to be haunting the place. The tomb of the Wolfe family at Graceland is sometimes said to be haunted. Harriet, a daughter who died in the fire, was there. She's probably the girl who flushes toilets. One of the ghosts that they talk about there is a ghost. They don't really see her, but now and then one of the toilets flushes all by itself, and then they hear a little girl giggling. And Harriet's father was the biggest toilet manufacturer in the city, so she's got as good a right to be that ghost as anybody else. Then there's this whole space down in the basement, like a sub-basement level. It still has some architectural features that you get different reports on what they originally were. And here's me picking the Wizard of Oz's nose. They let us poke around here several times when Wicked was showing. And in the organ loft, while people were doing ghost hunting there, they found these lip prints on the wall in an organ loft. Signed and dated 1939. I checked the date from in the vaudeville listings in the papers. There was a vaudeville troupe called the Dancing Sweethearts appearing at the theater on this date. So this is probably the signatures of the Dancing Sweethearts back in 1929, still on the wall at the Nederlander Theater. Let's move on. I'm going way over tonight. This is going to be one of the longer tours, I think. It's 773 Garrow with Ken. That's a blast from the past. I hear Ken is in Vegas now. I worked with Ken for a long time. The Ned Flanders Theater, I like that. Ken actually officiated my wedding, as a matter of fact, dressed as a Jedi. Right here in the river between Clark and LaSalle. This is another haunted space that I would go to. This is the site where the Eastland capsized in 1915. This was a ship that was already known as a fussy ship in 1915. It was always rocking back and forth. It wasn't really built to be a passenger ship. The capacity at the beginning of the year had been about 2,200, but they figured, hey, we got enough lifeboats for 2,500. Guess that means we can raise the capacity a bit. So the ship capsized. We'll make this one kind of quick. You can see all of the people standing on the side of the ship right over here. And here the ship is lying on its side. Look at how narrow this thing is. It doesn't look much wider than a school bus, and they had 2,500 people crammed on board that thing. Probably more than that, in fact. So the first place where ghosts get reported is right here at the 2nd Regiment, the Reed Murdoch building, built in 1912, the finest example of the Prairie School of Architecture on the Chicago River today. Now, the 1st and 2nd floors of this were pressed into service as a morgue. Every undertaker in the city was brought in, everybody they could get to do embalming. This is mostly where people were embalmed, and they were taken elsewhere to be laid out. There's some outstanding legends about other buildings, but there's a very complete list of all the morgues that were used. None of them was the Excalibur Club. But people have talked about stories about this place. One security guard told me one night he was making the rounds in the place, and all of a sudden he got shut into a room. The door slammed behind him and locked, and he couldn't get a hold of anybody. He couldn't get the door to unlocked. Then finally at 8 a.m., after spending the whole night there, the door just opened up by itself, and he walked right out. Spooky stuff in any case. But most of the bodies were taken to a place called the 2nd Regiment Armory about a mile west, which is the main place where people used to report ghosts. That building eventually got totally redone and became Harpo Studios, where Oprah used to film her show. So people have talked about a lot of things. It's torn down now. Well, there's a whole new building there now. This is a bit of the rubble. But the most famous ghost at Harpo Studios was one that they called the Gray Lady. This is a woman in a gray dress who floated down one of the hallways, leaving behind a scent of lilac perfume. That's the kind of ghost that we hear about quite a bit. Olfactory apparitions, it's called. People still smelling like Grandpa's pipe tobacco, or that strange mixture of cigarettes and gin that Grandma always smelled like. But here's the thing. When I started interviewing people at Harpo Studios, they all definitely thought it was haunted, but none of them had ever heard of the Gray Lady. It's just one of those ghost stories that go around more in the ghost hunting world than in the actual places. Oprah herself once referred to this on a Halloween episode. Her specific quote was, "There are extraterrestrial people in this building, and that's why I am never here after dark." Well, never here by herself after dark. I can't imagine the circumstances under which she would have been anyway. But the most common thing I heard was people said that they heard somebody crying in one of the bathrooms that they usually kept locked. There was also a woman who was working late there one night, said she went out to the vending machines, there was a little girl there. And she just thought it was somebody's kid that they had brought along. People did tend to bring their kids along on these things quite a bit. And she said, "Hey, do you want some candy?" And then the girl was just gone. Now today, the site is, presently, there's a new McDonald's there now. So I gotta wonder if they're like still hearing the voices and thinking it's the Hamburglar or something. But let's take it home and drive away. You got 3 years to pay. Driving away from here. So March of 1934, a woman named Mary Bregovy went out drinking and dancing with a couple of guys she had met at the Goldblatt Brothers department store down on the south side. Her friend thought the guys seemed too sleazy. I guess Mary Bregovy had slightly lower standards, so she and her went out dancing with these guys. End of the night, they came up here to the Loop where the bars were open a little bit later. Long story short, they wound up crashing right into this yellow L-track support beam. Mary Bregovy was thrown through the windshield of the car and killed. Her face had to be all stitched up. The Undertaker remembered it decades later. We used to go by there on the bus, and I would point at like whoever was there and go, "And they died right on this spot." One time there was an Amish couple there. They were not amused. It kind of gave me this look like I'm a cutty. I thought a guy might have pulled a pitchfork on me. So, in any case, Mary Bregovy, a couple of days later, was buried at Resurrection Cemetery and became the leading candidate, the most popular candidate for the true identity of the ghost that we call Resurrection Mary. She was down at Resurrection Cemetery down on the south side. And she herself is actually in an unmarked grave here. But Resurrection Mary is one of those ghosts that when people see her, it doesn't look like a ghost. It just looks like a girl sitting by the side of the road crying. They'll offer her a ride home, and she won't really say much other than to point them down Archer Avenue. But then when they get up by this cemetery, they turn to the side, and she's just gone. Now, the vanishing hitchhiker is something that folklorists have been talking about since the 1940s. At the time, they identified stories like this all over the country, and at the time, they said stuff along the lines of, this happens in every city, and we've identified all of the tropes of it. They talked about it was usually a young woman who was met at a dance hall or someplace like that. They would offer her a ride home, and she wouldn't really say much other than to point them down the road, but then they would turn to the side and she'd disappear. They'd go to the house, and the mother would say, "That can't have been my daughter. She died in a horrible wreck 3 years ago tonight." And then they would go out to the cemetery the next day and find a sweater that they had loaned her or some kind of outerwear sitting on the grave. There was this great record version that came on a cereal box where the woman actually took him out back to the family graveside, the family grave plot, which happened to be in the backyard. Now, usually, when people tell the story of Resurrection Mary, they're telling just the story of the vanishing hitchhiker. They usually include things like the dance hall, the Willowbrook Ballroom. But what's different about Mary is, for one thing, we've got a lot of first-hand accounts of this going back to the 1930s. And second of all, they don't usually follow the tropes of this. Now, when people tell the story of Resurrection Mary, they usually do include all of that stuff about the dance hall, and sometimes the outerwear shows up. Really, it's usually much more simple than that. The first-hand accounts are usually just, I picked up this girl that I thought I recognized, she got in the car, and I realized it wasn't who I thought she was. But then, as we drove by the cemetery, I turned to the side, and she was just gone. She never says what her name is. It could be that we've been calling her Resurrection Mary all this time because it's got a better ring to it than, like, Resurrection Beulah. Now, Mary Bregovy we've landed on as a candidate just because she died in a car wreck after being at a dance hall. But really, every account that I've seen says that the ghost is blonde. You can see Mary Bregovy was not. And also, based on that folklorist article that I just had a picture up from, I think the story was probably 3 or 4 years old by the time that Mary Bregovy died. But we've looked up pretty much every girl named Mary who was at Resurrection Cemetery in the right time period, and there's like 70 of them, including 5 or 6 who died in the Eastland, in fact. Now, for a while, the big story was the guy I was working with was saying it was Mary Miskowski who died in a horrible wreck on Halloween in 1930. But I couldn't really find anything to back this up. There was a Mary Miskowski who lived, we could find that from the census record. She lived right near Mary Bregovy. It's entirely possible they knew each other, but I couldn't find anything else. I finally found out she didn't die in 1930 at all. She died years and years later. Whoever told her, it was, apparently the guy had gotten a call from someone saying Resurrection Mary was my babysitter and told this whole story about how Mary Miskowski, with her babysitter, was killed in 1930. Apparently, Mary Miskowski must have really, really not wanted to babysit for this brat anymore. That's my guess, anyway. Vanishing hitchhikers turn up all over the country. Now we're going to go down to the south side. Well, not really the south side. 800 South Halstead. This is Hull House, which was one haunted place in Chicago that I knew about long before I moved here. There was this book, Haunted Heartland. Any other Haunted Heartland fans out there? I loved Haunted Heartland. Built in 1856 by Charles and Millicent Hull. By the time Charles Hull died himself, all of his family had died. He's a fixture on the Rose Hill Cemetery tours himself. You notice that the blinds are shut here. Sometimes we would come to this place and the blinds would be open. We'd get back on the bus and they were all closed again. There's nobody in the place after about 5 o'clock. But in 1889, a woman named Jane Addams took over and turned it into a settlement house. She effectively invented American social work here, but already found that the previous tenants had thought the place was haunted. She found that there were buckets of water set up on the top of the stairs, which she thought were something to do with an old superstition that ghosts could not cross over water. It's a very old superstition about ghosts. It's like why Ichabod Crane has to get across the bridge to get away from the Headless Horseman. There was even one room that they called the Haunted Room. If you take a look right here, so right where I'm hovering right now, bouncy, 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 near as I can triangulate, it would have been that one. About all we know of it is from Louise de Koven Bowen's memoir, Open Windows. Louise de Koven Bowen is also on my Graceland tours sometimes. She talks about how Eli Williams' gooseberries gave her huge digestive issues when she was a kid, has some great anecdotes about when Lincoln Park was a cemetery, and is also our main source on stories about Hull House being haunted in the days of Jane Addams. Jane herself wrote about the buckets of water thing, but there was one room called the Haunted Room that Louise de Koven Bowen filled in the details on. Nobody who tried to sleep in that room could get a good night's sleep. And Jane loved folklore. She wasn't a big believer in the supernatural, but she was always like sending anecdotes back to Yeats about Irish women still believing in banshees and stuff. So she and her partner, Mary Roget Smith, spent exactly one night in this room, and in the middle of the night, she looked out the end of the bed and saw a woman in an old-fashioned rustling dress looking down at her. She turned to the side and tried to get a better look and said, "Mary, is that you?" But Mary was still lying in bed next to her. Turned on the gaslight to get a better look, and as she did, the woman just vanished like a breath into the wind. And Jane never decided that what she had seen was actually a ghost, but she never spent another night in that room, I don't think, either. And the most recent sighting that I know of it was really just fairly recently. I went in there one time, and the person working the desk said, yeah, somebody just said that they saw this woman standing around in that room upstairs. They didn't know that was the haunted room. Also, the day that the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act a few years back, a Susan B. Anthony book flew off of the bookshelves in this place. So, Hull House was always known as a very woke institution, and it still is to this day. But this was a very superstitious neighborhood at the time in 1913, and in fact, they almost had to shut down operations in 1913 when a rumor went around that somewhere inside of the place they were hiding some sort of devil baby. According to the story, this kid was born with bright red scaly skin, horns, hooves, and a tail, apparently the result of somebody marrying outside of their religion. Story even went that when they brought this thing to Hull House, they passed a priest or a rabbi along the way, depending on who was telling the story. And this 2-day-old baby with the horns, hooves, and a tail jumped out of his father's arms, grabbed the clergyman's cigar, and started tap dancing and cussing him out in 3 languages. We tend to snicker at this now, but in those days, this was the kind of story that people took really seriously. And this was a story that had been around before. This, in fact, is not a picture of the Hull House Devil Baby. This is the Cleveland Devil Baby of 1888. It was made up as an April Fool's prank by the Cleveland Plain Dealer, which at the time was really well known for its April Fool's pranks. But the same story had gone around St. Louis, Atlanta, D.C. A similar variation went in around Indiana just a couple of years ago. But at the time, people took this stuff really seriously, and there were lines around the block offering to pay money to see the thing. And initially, Jane was just really mad, thinking, like, even if we had some poor deformed kid here, do you really think we would charge admission to see it? And people would say, well, it teaches a good lesson, right? You know, she was just forced to reflect on how strange an institution they must have seemed to a lot of these people. You know, they were trying to be social work but not giving Bible study. How strange. All these women living all together. How strange. But eventually she came to realize a lot of these people coming were women who had come over from the old country and were regarded as kind of embarrassments by the younger generation. I mean, their sons Giuseppe and Enrique were now their sons Joseph and Henry. They didn't speak the same language of their grandchildren. They were just kind of shut up in the attics. When they heard this story, they're like, aha, now you are on my territory. We'll move over a little bit to the side. There are still tours in the city that say that the Devil Baby was real, or that Jane Addams buried it alive in the garden next door, or that it was an Indian burial ground. Well, that's the story that you hear about the garden next door. I'm just reading a little bit of the comments on the side. This is the Hull House dining hall over on the left. There was at one point like a 12-building complex here. There also used to be a fountain standing right where that circle is from the class of 1969, but it fell apart. Way to build a fountain, class of 1969. It's all part of the University of Illinois campus now. Aiden got into that school, but didn't end up going there. This is the ghost stories used to call this space here the Garden of Evil. Once again, there were a lot of stories about the Devil Baby being buried alive there, or it being an Indian burial ground or crap like that. What we do know is that at the time Jane Addams moved in, there was a tavern on one side of Hull House and a funeral home on the other. E.J. McGenie's funeral home, it seems to have been right around right here. Eventually became the Hull House Children's Center on this spot. There was at least one baby who died there that we know of, and probably more than that. There was one night we were walking across that porch over towards this garden, very distinctly heard the sound of a baby crying. Spent a long time making sure there wasn't an actual baby in the bushes or anything like that. Didn't find anything. But something there is about this space that really does freak some people out. It's like in the back there, you can see this picture of Jane Addams up on the wall on a banner. One night a woman absolutely panicked seeing that. She was about 70 years old and really, really high. But also people would like walk around that place and experience dizziness, shortness of breath. One woman puked all over the bushes. That was a really fun night. But there was one summer, the summer of 2006, we just got weird picture after weird picture in this garden back when the fountain was still there. Like this one. Woman took a picture like this, and I can't figure out what that thing is. In front of the fountain. Looks like a girl wearing an old-fashioned hoop skirt to me. Her name might be Becky or Molly or something. Then there's this one. This doesn't look like the kind of thing you would actually put in. The big glare there makes that tricky. But that also looks like a girl over on the side standing there going like this. This one, I don't know what that is. Looks like a floating empty dress with like pants with nobody inside them. There's Hector, who was my driver at the time, also a podcast co-host, with this weird tree that really freaked people out sometimes. Something there was about this tree that bothered people. Then it got struck by lightning and had to be taken down. Let's move out to the staircase, shall we? Wrong buttons, wrong buttons, wrong buttons. Let's move to the staircase. Those of you talking about urban legends, you're leaving out Johnny Weissmuller. There are so many urban legends about Johnny Weissmuller, the swimmer, in this place. But one of the first ghost pictures I ever saw when researching this stuff as a kid, I usually stayed away from the ghost books. They scared me. I was more into the Loch Ness Monster stuff. I mean, no Scottish lake monster was really going to get me in Des Moines. But ghosts could pop up anywhere, so I was always a little scared of those. And there were some pictures of what they called monk ghosts coming down the staircase here, which people were careful to point out that this was never a monastery or anything, but it was occupied by nuns for a while. The Little Sisters of the Poor used this house as a home for the elderly between the time that Charles Hull lived here and the time that Jane Addams moved in. So there have been a lot of pictures of stuff coming down the stairs, and some of it's pretty spooky looking. Like this is taken by the same person who took that girl in a hoop skirt picture on the very same night, in fact. And if you look up to the top there, you see that nook with a vase in it. According to a sign next to it, that was known as a coffin nook. It was for getting coffins around the corner back in the days when they had funerals at the house. There's also this thing that looks like a baby standing on the stairs. Very creepy stuff, that. Refilling the old gin. I'm not exactly smashed or anything like that, but I'm feeling it. You'll probably tell I'm feeling it. Then there was this one. This guy sent me, I got this picture of an amazing anomaly over at Hull House. Trick with this is it does really look like, a girl standing on the stairs looking downward, seen in profile here. Very spooky looking, but eventually, when I analyzed it a bit more, here's the full picture. Over on the side, you see the reflection of his nose and his lips. This is a reflection of his ear on the staircase. And since then, every time I've seen a picture of a ghostly form coming down a staircase, like the Brown Lady in, I think, the UK, there's a lot of ghost pictures that circulate in the ghost hunting world of ghosts that look like people in hooded robes coming down the stairs. Every picture I've seen of that now looks like an ear to me. Like this one. This one I totally faked. If I just showed you this one on a ghost tour, it would be pretty spooky looking, but this is Hector's ear that I photoshopped onto the staircase. But now and then we would get one like this. You see this face looking downward in profile here? Now some people look at this and never see what we're looking at. It's an interesting phenomenon to me. But this is one that I know they didn't Photoshop because they showed it to me at the time. This would have been about 2005 or 2006, pre-smartphones. Unless they had already taken it and loaded it onto their phone or something like that. It was a tour for a freshman at the University of Illinois. And one of those get to know your city through its ghost stories things that comes up now and then. I do one of those tours for DePaul all the time. But this doesn't look like a freshman girl's face to me. So it's spooky anyway. What I always tell people is there's no such thing as good ghost stories. There's only cool. There's no such thing as good ghost evidence. There's just cool ghost evidence. This, I wouldn't hold this up as evidence of the supernatural, but it is really cool. That's about enough for me. But then again, when there's stuff that I can absolutely debunk, we'll move around the back here, show it for an example. Now, none of these bricks are original. The house is from 1856. The original bricks are back behind these ones. They're still there. There's even a place on the inside where you can, they have, the drywall taken away so you can see the original bricks. But it was all restored back in the 1960s. They do think the banister on the staircase is original from 1856. But it's hard to know. Nobody was really keeping track for the first 60 or 70 years. We're going way over time tonight. That's all right. I got no place to be, and we got more people than usual tonight, too. So, hi, everybody. Welcome along. I'm Adam for Mysterious Chicago Tours. Tonight is the Drunk History Edition. I've been a little more tipsy than normal. You got these window clings over here. This is what I wanted to show off. These window clings of kids from the Hull House Day Nursery. People would send me pictures of these and would just be absolutely panicked thinking they had gotten ghost pictures. And I would just say, nope, just window clings. It's like, weird that they didn't get more happy children pictures anyway. But back on the old bus route, this is one that I couldn't do anymore today now that the place has been rebuilt, but I would get back onto the bus and say, all right, who wants to go to the body dump? And everybody would be like, yay! And we'd all chant, body dump, body dump. When people write to me and say that this is really sick of me, I can't really argue with them. But this is what the body dump looked like at the time. This little field near Damon, Elston, and Fullerton, which itself was scary enough before they redid that whole intersection. But this was a space that I found back when I was working with Weird Chicago. Troy sent me this article saying, hey, there's this article about another Holmes Castle. Can you figure out where this was? It was at where, they found an article saying that it was where number 65 Sobieski Street ought to be. But that's not a very good address. Finally found out that Sobieski was just this one tiny little stretch of road. And through various reasoning, we were able to figure out that there was this building right here associated with H.H. Holmes, the Devil in the White City guy. Right around the time the stories about the Castle building were falling apart in Chicago, they decided that they had found another building that was full of Holmes' paperwork and receipts signed by Patrick Quinlan as janitor. This was a 150-foot-long, one-story building that apparently had been the home to a glass bending factory. Only Holmes was never bending any glass there. And we could only really come up with so many explanations for why a known serial killer would want a 150-foot-long furnace. So we started joking that this place was the body dump. We would take people out here really on Mysterious Chicago tours just because it's right between the Liars Club and the Virgin Mary salt stain at the Fullerton Underpass. So that was really a big thing when I found out that this location was right between those two spaces. We drove right by it on the tour route already, and people were asking about Holmes stuff a lot. So we started coming here just as a historical curiosity. Also, it was really spooky to drive down the road at this time because it was just this little dead-end street and a vacant lot and a junkyard. But I started telling these stories, and lo and behold, we started having weird things happen. Like there was a light attached to this building you see in the background. There was a floodlight at the back that occasionally would go on or off every time I said the name Holmes, which was a very bizarre thing. Then we started getting ghost pictures there, like this shot, with this weird-looking figure standing behind the tree. We tried to replicate this, couldn't find a thing. We found this thing. There's this woman standing here, then there's this translucent figure over to the right of her. Now, there was a supposed Holmes victim who lived fairly close to here named Emily Van Tassel. I kind of think that the stories about her weren't really concrete, but she just lived a couple of blocks away. There's also this weird figure right over here between the woman in the knit hat and the serial killer van over at the right. It was parked there for months. All of this stuff has been built over and torn down now. We went out there a few weeks ago for the morning mini tour. There was also this tree that was always oozing some kind of a reddish-brown blood-like gunk. It's probably due to the fact that there was iron oxide in the soil. This place had been a junkyard for a long time. Rust probably got into the ground. But still, you go to the body dump and there's a black branch with blood that keeps dripping. It's pretty spooky business anyway. Now, this has all been built over now. I gotta wonder if the condos that they built here are still said to be haunted by the people who live around here. And you know what? I am going a little over time, but let's go to one more place. I'm focusing on the places that I used to go to on ghost tours that I've told 100 times, but none tonight. But let's go ahead and cover up here in Lincoln Park, which was the old city cemetery. First, you got David Kennison, the supposed Revolutionary War veteran, though he totally was not, who sure looks like he ought to have been a ghost. It's like he took a drawing of Jacob Marley to the barber and said, "Make me look like this." But then upwards, elsewhere in Lincoln Park, is the tomb of Ira Couch. Now, this is the one remaining mausoleum from back when Lincoln Park was the city cemetery. There's various theories as to why they never moved this one. They all kind of boil down to money. Not to mention the fact that it's really, really hard to move a mausoleum. But there were some ghost stories about this. There's some mysteries about it. We don't really know exactly how many people are buried inside of the place or interred inside of the place. Nobody's buried there. It's above ground. Most likely it's Ira, his parents, and a couple of stillborns, and possibly a stranger who died at the hotel, or a friend of a friend or something. There was a rumor around 1888, they said that if you hung around this place at midnight, a woman in a white dress would come floating out of the door. Now, by this time, it was already said to be haunted around here. Everybody remembered that this was a cemetery. Charlie Bates used to take his girlfriends to a lot of Stiles out here and say, you know, this was a cemetery. Then he'd ditch her there. This came up in her trial after she murdered him. Even his friends agreed that he had it coming. But there's some mysteries here. You know, if there is in fact a ghostly white woman in white who showed up in this place, it probably would have been Ira's mother, Mahitable McGee Couch. But nobody really knows what it looks like on the inside anymore. It hasn't been open in well over a century. There's reports of somebody going inside in the 1880s, and he said at the time that all the bodies were moved in the 1870s. But the Couch family plot at Rose Hill does not say anything about Ira, his parents, or anybody else like that being buried in this place. So I was out here with a group, and one night I noticed there was a crack under the door about the size of your pinky finger. So using some really high-tech equipment called the Tomb Snooper 500... So this is an iPhone taped to a wire hanger. I think I still got those boots. Here's what it looks like on the inside. Behind the door is another door. There's a still. No, I don't have a still of it. Never mind. I thought I had a still of it. It's probably over in the Grave Robbing 101 deck. But I feel like I've gotten past level 1, but not level 2. And among the rubble down there, there wasn't anything like a skull or anything like that. We'll just move on a little bit here. Let's check out the Congress Hotel a little bit. Here we are going into the Congress Hotel. Look at this handsome guy. Walking right up to William Henry Harrison's chair. Not that he was sitting upright for any of the 30 days that he was president. But the Congress Hotel was built in 1893. By 1913, it was a star in its own right, home to movie stars, opera singers, gangsters. Gangsters and opera singers tried to kill themselves in this place with astonishing regularity. Now, there have been a lot of stories about the place. Every hallway, when we investigated it, had its own unique odor. Like this hallway smelled like roast beef with ass. Another one smelled like Lysol and cigarettes. Here we are in the Gold Ballroom. Very spooky looking space in the dark. And the kitchen over to the side of this, every now and then all the appliances would turn themselves on, even though they weren't actually in use anymore. Drove the staff crazy. They would also say that they heard the sound of what might have been Benny Goodman playing in this place. And of course, you know, in the beginning of every episode of this show, we play Benny Goodman coming to you live from the Congress Hotel in downtown Chicago, right in here. And if you get through this hallway, you come to the Florentine room. This was kind of ghost ground zero. For a while, they were just letting us come in here and have the run of the place. Like 2-3 times a week, I knew all the security guards. We'd have the weirdest stuff go on in this space. There was one security guard who told us they saw a guy sleeping on the bench out here outside of the Florentine room, and they came up to ask the guy what was going on, and he just disappeared on them. There have been a number of different ghost stories reported. One is a shadow guy. There's a guy on the internet who says that he is so brilliantly determined that it must be the ghost of Captain Lou Ostheim, like I hadn't already been saying that on tours for decades at the time. It's usually seen by people associated with the military. Captain Lou Ostheim shot himself in the middle of what was described as night terrors at the time. He was just out of the army, probably suffering out of the Spanish-American War, possibly suffering from PTSD, woke up in the midst of one of his night terrors and shot himself on the day before his wedding. There's also any number of opera singers haunting the place. Not to mention the Custom House that used to stand there on the spot before the Great Chicago Fire was also said to be haunted. That had been going on for a while. And I gotta clear up something here. One time, the first investigation of this place, there was this hole in the wall. We looked inside, and there was this thing that looked like a hand grabbing onto a crossbar. For a while, we thought it was a glove that got plastered over by some construction worker with a weird sense of humor. Last time I saw it, it had deteriorated enough that we couldn't really, that it probably wasn't a glove, in fact. So we don't know what it was. It just kind of looks cool. I started making jokes about there were stories about a guy being walled up inside of the place. So this could be the hand of Drywall Dave reaching out towards freedom. I thought it was obviously a joke, but this ended up all over the internet and taught me a valuable lesson about how you can't just assume that people will know that your joke ghost story is really a joke. There's Hector, walking around in the place with this one security guard who was always good for a couple of good stories. Here it is full of orbs. These are dust particles. Orbs are not ghosts, they're ghost farts. Now, there was also stories that around this room on the 3rd floor of the south wing where the gold ballroom is, they would see a guy with a peg leg. And Ken, my old partner in the business, told me that he did find the newspaper article about a hobo with a peg leg who died in the place. He was probably flat out lying about this, but there was a story in the 1910s. There was a circus performer named Charles Conway. He and his wife, pictured here, were con artists. They would talk people into paying their rent for them and then kill them, is the shortest version of the story. But then they were eventually caught. Charles Conway, who did in fact have a wooden leg, was taken to the Honor Farm, one of the low security prisons, but he escaped and was never seen again. The last murder they committed was just a few blocks away from this, so it's theoretically possible he could have died here as a hobo with a peg leg. Then there's this shot from the Florentine Ballroom. There was actually one security guard who would not go into the Florentine Ballroom unless he absolutely couldn't help it. Same night that this picture was taken, there was this picture of me with this strange shadow in the background. Now, that would not be my shadow. My shadow, based on the light source, would have been, for one thing, over on the other side of the wall, and also a whole lot larger than this. This would have to be a shadow of something that was either very small or right up against the wall. We'll zoom in on that. It kind of looks like a dude standing there like this. Now, it was in this room that Teddy Roosevelt announced that he was going to be leaving the Republican Party because they were no longer the Progressive Party. Fuck Dinesh D'Souza. And so I like to imagine this is a picture of me with the ghost of Teddy Roosevelt standing right there. But also, there was a night that we were walking around this place. I would usually let people walk around in the dark first. And one night I went in there and I was just spooked to hell myself. I got kind of used to being in these places, but sometimes you'd go in and it would just seem extra spooky. So I decided, okay, I'm probably just playing tricks on my own head. I'm going to go turn on the light. I got my hand right next to the light switch, and as I did, we heard this bang coming out of the hallway over to the left-hand side of the picture. It was a gunshot. I don't mean like we heard a loud noise. We heard a gunshot. We spent like 20 minutes looking around trying to figure out what had happened. Didn't find a thing, nothing that could have caused that sound. Once the story got around, of course, they started messing with us a little bit. They started setting off firecrackers. That's a totally different sound. But here, there's even an audio recording of it. Here, watch. Around this corner. This piano is occasionally known to play itself, according to security. Hello? Shuffling nervously.
Is that Hector?
It's not Hector. No, it's not Hector. They're going to let Hector. Yeah, I can turn on the lights in a minute. I also mentioned in that audio that the piano in the back right corner there was occasionally known to play itself. And that is in fact true. Now, somebody asked me one time about if I knew what kind of music Teddy Roosevelt might have played at his rallies. And I'm enough of a dork to know that Teddy Roosevelt's campaign theme song that year in 1912 was the Battle Hymn of the Republic. People would like jump up in the middle of his speeches and start singing, "Mine eyes have seen the glory." Because, that was his whole thing, this is a serious campaign. We stand at Armageddon and we battle for the Lord. No, not unlike the speech on primetime this evening. So they asked me, what kind of music was it? Because there had just been a TV show talking about era cues. The idea that if you play music from a ghost era or something like that, it will induce the ghost to show up. And I thought, well, that sounds like fun. So I went over to the piano and picked out this scratchy version of Battle Hymn of the Republic. Dee-dee-dee-dee, dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee. I would stop in the middle of the phrase, and nothing happened that first night, but it sounded so spooky in a dark ballroom that I decided I was going to do it every night. And there were occasionally times when I would walk away and there'd be another piano note. It was never the next note that should have come next in the melody, but nobody ever said these guys know how to play the piano. Here's an example. Nothing the night I was recording, as you can see. But spooky all the same. I do think that is actually one of the greatest songs ever written, though. Battle Hymn of the Republic. Well, the melody was "Oh Brothers, Will You Meet Us," and then John Brown's Body, which was written not about John Brown the abolitionist, but about a member of their unit named John Brown who was sick, that they were kind of teasing, though the similarity to the name of the dead abolitionist was lost on nobody. There was also a verse that didn't get recorded, but one of the people who was involved in writing it later told a magazine, after the verse about "we'll hang Jeff Davis from a sour apple tree," it's "we'll feed him on the apples till he gets the diarrhea." Love it. Also, he'd be dead by then, but... Eventually, security started messing with us, putting in signs like, "You will die." It's like, well, yeah, give me a date or something like that. Well, of course we're gonna die. Come on. This is up in 12 North, which was generally regarded as the spookiest of the floor. Said to be haunted by the ghost of a little boy who ran up and down the hall, usually said to be the ghost of Carl Langer. This is his brother. Now, Carl and his brother were checked into this place by their mother, who had fled from Germany during the beginnings of World War II, and was having kind of a nervous breakdown. She was afraid they were going to get sent back where things were not conditions had not exactly improved. So she checked into this hotel and jumped out of the window, taking both sons with her. There was a photograph of Jan Tommy, the younger son, but apparently there was never a photograph of Carl, the younger one. But again, I haven't looked up the story in long enough to know for sure. But all right. We're way over time tonight. This has been a particularly long one. But here we go, everybody. Time to plug the upcoming events. That's the thanks screen, not the upcoming one. There we go. A week from today, I will be more sober than this to do Art Deco Gems in Chicago history as a virtual tour. Next in-person tour is going to be Saturday morning, the Graceland Cemetery tour. And also I'll be talking about Graceland Cemetery a bit tomorrow morning, Friday morning, about 7:30 on WLS. Followed by Find a Grave Friday, right here at Mysterious Chicago's Facebook page. You can only tune into the live streams, the daily live streams on the Facebook, but I try to have these other ones on more things. There's 6:30 Boat Cruise is now completely sold out for September 30th. 8:30 still has plenty of space to go. But I kept working on that boat a shift or two a week just to make sure that I got added onto the schedule, and we did. We are on the schedule now. Everything is a go. So lots of great stuff coming up over here. Tomorrow night we got the Whiskey and a Cookie show on the Patty Vasquez Show Facebook page. Those of you longtime watchers of that might remember that Elliot and I were joking one time that there should be a James Bond movie called A Shitty Way to Die. I even started humming like the bit of the song. I've now recorded the entire theme song to A Shitty Way to Die. So lots of good stuff coming up. Should you need Mysterious Chicago sweatshirt, hoodie, etc., go to cafepress.com/mysteriouschicago. They'll hook you up. There's also the on adamchicago.com. Not only there's the Patreon, but on adamchicago.com it'll link you to the Coyote calendar for 2023. Photographs of coyotes in cemeteries. It's one that I'm really very proud of that one. It turned out really cool, I thought. But with that, everybody, I will put the Benny Goodman back on. That's the wrong button. That's the correct button. That's also the wrong button. Jeez, what am I even doing here? There we go. All right, everybody. Here's the Benny Goodman again. Thanks for joining me while I've been drinking. Ein bed ma, Lisa. No point at a breathalyzer. You've all seen me drinking this whole entire time. I don't feel particularly toasty. I know that I kind of am. It's one of those things where if I had been sitting down and I stood up, I'd feel it. John, I heard that I did notice there was some mentions of colonoscopies. I got 8 years to go before they recommend I get one of those. Well, could I pass? No, I can't imagine I would pass a breathalyzer test at this point. No, sir. No, sirree, Bob. Hey, Laura. Well, don't worry. As soon as we get off of this program. Thank you, 773 Garrow. Carol, 750 Halstead Street. That'd be about a block and a half from Halstead Street. From the Hull House. See, the nose is a little bit red. I think my nose is always kind of red. Thanks. Everybody seems to like the shirt tonight. This is a brand new shirt. First day I've worn it. You know, I like my mid-century modern vibes, as you can see back here. Mid-century modern plastered over an Art Deco facade, over an Art Deco frame. Kind of like how the Civic Opera building is essentially an Art Deco style, Art Deco frame with a Beaux-Arts style over it. Ooh, Devil Baby, Muppet Babies versus Santa Baby. Well, I do not care for Santa Baby or Christmas music just in general, so I'm going to say, Devil Baby will make our dreams come true. When your room looks kinda weird and you wish that you weren't there.
That was the bugle call rag. Benny Goodman's own arrangement.
Often my room looks kinda weird and I wish that I weren't there. It's a tricky one. This is a tricky shirt to wear because it's really too light to wear in October in general. It's a very October shirt in visually, but not materially. It feels like a Halloween costume. It's like very, very thin polyester. It's almost like a smock that says Halloween on it. Nancy, I will find the cats. And then, well, Miles is presently hanging out on the green chair back over here. Miles? He's stretched all across it and not trying to claw at it for once. I guess there was a lot of colonoscopy stuff going on tonight. I remember after Ebert absolutely ripped on the movie Brown Bunny, the guy who directed it said, I hope Roger Ebert gets colon cancer. And Roger Ebert said, I have had a colonoscopy. They let me watch it on a little screen, and it was better than your movie. That guy could burn like nobody's business. Thanks, Linda. Tonight's not a totally typical night, but gives you a general idea of what kind of stuff that I do. Hope to have you back sometime soon. Glad to have everybody anyway. Oh, here comes Priya. Hey, Priya. Look at everybody. It's Priya down here. Over behind this little chair. Desk chair. She's a little more skittish. But also a little more cuddly than Miles.
Down Harlem Way, they're all trucking. And here's Helen Ward to tell you all about it.
Linda, I wish I had better stories about the Civic Opera House. There are various stories about Samuel Insull claiming he would come back and sit on the throne like which it is shaped, but most of the stories about Insull in the building are not entirely true. The story is always that he built it for his wife, who was an aspiring opera singer who couldn't make it in New York. His wife was a former actress who did inspire the story of the guy passing out drunk writing a bad review in Citizen Kane. But he did not build the opera house for her. They were barely on speaking terms at the time, and she was not an opera singer. People are probably kind of confusing it with the story of Harold Fowler McCormick leaving his wife for an opera singer of questionable talents. And getting a testicle transplant to be ready for marriage. Karen, look up hardaddy.com, H-A-R daddy. Don't Google hard daddy. Hey, Laura. Yeah, she's Priya has been with us for just a couple days over a year now. We lost Charlotte to cancer a little over a year ago. That would be fun. I would love to do a thing of Civic Opera. Layla Royale works there occasionally, too. In fact, she was working there yesterday when I was running a boat tour that went by it, so I had everybody reach up and go, "Hi, Layla." It was fun. Gene, surely you guys don't drink every time I talk about testicle transplants. Yeah, Charlotte was great. We loved Charlotte. Very sad. She was such a cuddly cat. Priya is learning to cuddle now. She's still got some of her kitten energy, but she's a wonderful cat. And she and Miles get along really well. Charlotte kind of tolerated Miles. Testicular transplant, that's a rather tender subject. That's a rather tasteless joke. Oh, here comes Miles. Oh, okay.
Welcome for them on the
You
Alamo.
want to come say hi to people or what? Come on. Oh, yeah, it's only when I really start moving around that I notice that I have had more to drink than I normally do. Yeah, Harold Fowler McCormick had a gland transplant. Exactly who or what's glands they transferred into him was a matter of some dispute. Though Ganawalska, the opera singer of questionable talents, for whom he left Edith Rockefeller McCormick, who was heir to the Standard Oil name and money, in her one minor comment about the marriage later on, she indicated that the testicle transplant worked a little too well. That's all I got to say about that. Good night, Jerry. Oh, Priya. Priya, come say hi. Yeah. You're gonna come say hi. Aren't you gonna come say hi? Priya's a little bit more skittish. But there's Priya. Okay. Two for one on vasectomies? Who needs two? Oh, she's an adorable cat. She's very cuddly, too. She's getting to be more and more cuddly. Oh, hey, 773. All right. It's all right. Always glad to be interrupted. Are you the guy who's on Faces of the Forgotten? I'd really like to talk to whoever that is about why they thought that was the vampire grave. I can see why they thought it was Charles Volney Dyer and why they thought it was 1875, but I can't figure out why they thought it was that grave. I mean, Charles Volney Dyer probably told Moncure Conway about it in 1875 when he came to town. This is like our sole story sole data about that. But it probably would have been at Rose Hill. So we got to talk about the vampire story there. Because it first became well known to people in this book, Food for the Dead, by Michael Bell. Really good book about the vampire phenomenon. He does talk about a Rose Hill on that page, but it's a Rose Hill in like Vermont. See, Dyer himself would not have been involved in such a thing. He reported it, but he was not doing exorcisms. He was a Swedenborgian. From Helen and Richard Crow, that makes sense. But no, it more likely would have been at the Old City Cemetery. But we love Charles Volney Dyer around here. From Helen's an interesting take on it. From Helen, it was a little more data, but I would love to see what data she had about it. Because it probably would have been before 1875. Turkey Testicle Festival. Man, what are we on about now? Absolutely. One of these days we're going to do Richard for Finding a Grave Friday, probably in October. And Helen I can't do because I know where her grave is. She's right by the Pilgrim of Bohemian National. I was just talking about her at lunch the other day. Wise men rings it, even Mr. Crosby sings it. We have colonoscopy, testicle transplants. What else can we cover today? What else can we cover tonight? Was I mixing drinks tonight? No, I had a straight smoked pineapple rum, finishing off the bottle. And then I switched to cheap gin. Not mixed with anything. Yeah, I know the one where the face supposedly appears. But Van Zamboni is way away from there. Well, let's meet up there one of these days soon, anyway. I know the face grave. I've never been able to see anything in it myself, nor could I back up any of the backstories. Yeah, Mary Shedden. I could never back up the backstories about it either. I got the impression it might have just been something Ursula made up. Dr. Van Zamboni is quite a ways away from there, really. I mean, you know, easy walk. We cover mammograms too. Have we covered pap smears yet? Seven of the rain. We won't get into Ursula here, but you know you can find me there quite a bit. I think I'll probably do one mid-September. I'm not booking a lot of tours for September. I'm kind of resting up for October. I got a few private ones coming up. I got 2 private ones on the same day. I just had somebody email me about a September. They really want an October one that would include all these extra things and then be on a bus. I don't know if I can do it. That's a lot of extra work. Hang on a second, I gotta get to the door. We got an author in town for Worldcon crashing with us tonight. Reminds me, I gotta get the comforter out of the thing. Yeah, Candy Graham. Luckily, you know, when somebody rings my doorbell, they're a couple of floors below me, so. So somebody, you know, by the time I found out I could see on the intercom that it was a shark, the land shark. This is Ronnie's desk, not mine, so I'll hang out a little bit more. Hello. Hey, man. Hey, we're live streaming here. You want to introduce yourself?
Oh, hey. George Rage. Nice to meet everyone.
George does graphic novels, right?
Graphic novels and middle grade novels.
Ah, middle grade novels. I did middle grade novels once upon a time. And now I just drink gin all the time. So, as you see, it'll do it to you, you know. I've had a middle grade novel on submit for the last year. I'm pretty sure it's not going to sell.
Yeah, well, listen, I just told I was on submission for 2 years.
Whoa, okay. Huh. Well, that's nice. All right. There's the new George here. This George. Sorry, we're doing the drunk history edition of my personal ghost story, so
That's awesome.
I'm a little bit tipsy at the moment. So, yep.
And here's the short encore portion of Benny Goodman's forthright invitation at the beginning.
All right, everybody. That reminds me, I gotta get the laundry. Speaking of books, I got a couple of book events coming up. September 10th, I will be at the University of Illinois booth for an hour at Printers Row. September 12th, Centuries and Sleuths, the Mystery Bookstore in Forest Park. And September 26th at Anderson's Bookshop. When Anderson's Bookshop tells you to do something, you do it. I've been doing it for a while. We still have friends in the book world. I just took A.S. King, who writes fantastic young adult novels, on a private ghost tour, her and her kid.
Presenting the music of Benny Goodman and his
A couple of weeks ago, right after I was out having drinks with Claudia Gray, who writes Star Wars books.
This is the National Broadcasting Company.
Thanks, 773. I love the George Fergus stuff. That stuff is great. And Dr. Brainerd. Megan, I'll probably get them up on Facebook eventually. They're on adamchicago.com at the moment anyway. The Benny is wrapped up, so I should point out patreon.com/adamchicago. Also, adamchicago.com has links to all of the stuff. Patreon, today I actually posted an addendum. Today is Deep Research Post Day, where I posted a whole bunch of stuff about Fatal Mary, the woman who was said to be the kiss of death for gangsters. Everybody she kissed ended up dead. And I had thought that nobody was really writing about her until the 1930s, after she'd already had 7 or 8 people dead. But then, while I was doing some work on her today, I found a couple more stories from 1925 and 1926 in the Chicago Daily News. So I sent out a whole bonus post with more stuff there. And then we went to find one of her boyfriend's love nests as the morning mini tour, and played everybody's favorite game, Is It Still There? That may or may not be a hint for tomorrow's Find a Grave Friday. But alright, everybody. Yeah, so for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, the 773, there's a guy on YouTube commenting under the name 773. You might have seen him on a morning mini tour earlier on. So, alright, everybody. Benny Goodman is wrapped up. That means it's probably time for me to wrap up, which means it's time to plug the upcoming events once more. I don't think I got too badly tipsy tonight, did I? I'm a little badly tipsy for me, but it's about as drunk as I ever get. I'm really a very light drinker. I rarely have more than 2 drinks. Rarely even have the second drink. Because, look, here's the thing. I really enjoy bourbon. I really enjoy drinks, and I don't ever want it to be a problem for me. I don't ever want to be in a position where I have to cut back. So usually I have like a drink, and that's plenty for me, or I'll nurse one the entire night, or maybe in a long night I'll get to 2. Tonight we're doing drunk history, so I had probably 3 or 4 over the course of the night, which is about as far as I ever get. Though I will tell you, the worst I ever got was one night we did a zombie pub crawl. Hi, Priya. I did a zombie pub crawl with Ken at Weird Chicago, and I got so drunk they had to take me back home. We were drinking, the Tommy Gun vodka that came in a Tommy Gun shaped bottle that was absolutely terrible. They clearly put all their resources into the bottle. And they had to take me back home. I think I've got some audio recordings from it that are not flattering. I know I did a big Hans Conried impression for a while there. It wasn't pretty, but I puked a lot. That was about as drunk as I ever got in my whole entire life. But it was pretty fun. But, yeah, now we're in the coherent, even insightful stage. I better really quit before I get even worse and start talking about how much I hate young adult literature. I can channel it all into how much I thought Dear Evan Hansen sucked, I suppose. And probably not piss off too many people, but maybe some. But alright, everybody, this has been rather entertaining for me. We'll do this again sometime around October. Yeah, that 773, that Tommy Gun stuff, I think I still got a bottle of it someplace, an empty bottle. It was better for paint thinner than actual drinking. And, meanwhile, I was writing young adult novels for a living, and I was supposed to be giving advertisements for this terrible vodka at the same time. That just didn't square with me. I probably will not be doing that again. Zombie Pub Crawl I would kind of do again, but buses are more expensive than ever to rent these days. Please tell you about YA. I'm not going to tell you about YA. YA sucks. Everybody's a dick. YA Twitter is like the plastics lunch table, and it is always Wednesday, and if you ever get something pink, they'll just tell you to stay in your own lane. Alright. What's the word, Thunderbird? What's the tail, Nightingale? Alright. The comments are starting to make less and less sense to me, so I know it is definitely time for me to log off. Things coming up. If I've told you to email me, I may not remember it, but by all means, email me. You can find all the contact information at adamchicago.com, not to mention the Venmo, not to mention the Patreon, which is your best bang for buck. But all right, everybody. Thanks a lot for joining me. I will see you tomorrow morning, 7:30 on WLS. And then 10 o'clock right over here on the Mysterious Chicago Facebook live stream for Find a Grave Friday. Thanks a lot, everybody. I'm Adam from Mysterious Chicago Tours wearing this awesome shirt. Got me more compliments on a new shirt than I've gotten in a long time. It's almost like a flu vlog of shirts. But thanks for joining me. I'm Adam from Mysterious Chicago Tours, saying to stay safe and stay strong and let good manners be a thing from which you do suffer. And of course, everybody, you gotta stay spooky. Have a great night, everybody. Watch out, she's a nightmare, Nancy Drew.